Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. Today, I'm with a very good friend who, mashallah, has been really instrumental in helping me develop the evolutionary narrative, especially when it comes to the historical perspective and the racial perspective and the ethical social Darwinism perspective. So I'm with Abdurrahman. He recently wrote an article, which I put on my website. He was debunking Aaron Ra's claims when it comes to evolutionary racism. And I invited him to basically do a live stream. He doesn't like showing his face, so you guys are just stuck with the parrot. We're going to be speaking with a parrot for a good deal of time. But Abdurrahman, I can assure you, is a Homo sapien who's pretty much, an expert when it comes to evolutionary history. So anyway, Abdurrahman, how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, what about you?
Alhamdulillah. So let's get started. I mean, firstly, before we get into the actual video, I just want to share the link of the article that you wrote.
Sure.
So why did you write this article? What was the sort of thinking behind it?
To be honest, when you made your video on Darwin's racism, Aaron Ra, in the comment section, he said, "Oh, here's a refutation," and he put his own video, which is now 6 years old. So I was like, "All right, fair enough. Let's just have a look at the video." And I looked at the video, and yeah, to be honest, that's pretty much it. And I looked at it and I thought, might as well respond to it. There's only like 100,000 views, so not much. That's it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular article I'm going to share for the viewers.
Actually, can you go a bit down with the article?
Yeah, sure.
I want to see the pictures because in my phone I didn't see the illustrations properly. Not these pictures, my actual pictures. I didn't share these pictures. Let's see.
Yeah, pretty good.
Well, the caption is not there. That's unfortunate because I put the references to the caption and I explained what each picture is. But obviously that one, the first one, is obviously comparing the sizes, chimpanzee, Pithecanthropus, and Sinanthropus, and then Neanderthal and Homo sapien. The bottom one is just the gradual evolution of, missing links to us today. And then the last one, is there a last one? If you go down, there should be and obviously you can tell what that is. The other picture, that should have been on the page in itself, but unfortunately, but that one's obviously a tree of life, so I don't need to explain that. That's very obvious.
All right. Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, it's a great article, guys. Just completely debunking Aaron's, claims on evolutionary racism. And in fact, on the morning of the debate with Aron back in 2016, Abdurrahman was giving me advice on, how to refute his point. So let's go into the deep end here.
What's the debate on 2016? That not long ago?
Yes, 5 years now. Would you believe it? Yeah, 5 years.
I feel like, whatever.
Yeah, time is flying.
True.
So I'm gonna share my screen, and then if you can tell me, bro, the times on when to stop.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
And then we'll go there.
All right. The first 5 minutes, Skip. We all agree what he says.
Yeah. What's he saying? What's he saying in the first 5 minutes?
That there was racism before Darwin. It's like, well, yeah, of course. Who would? Who in the same mind doesn't deny that? Who in the same mind denies that? Of course, there was racism before Darwin.
All right. So we're at the 5 minute mark.
All right. Okay, a bit more. Yeah, he just showing that Abraham Lincoln was a racist or whatever. Again, Christians are racist. Again, nothing to do with us. Fair enough. I agree with him. A bit more. I think a little bit. Yeah, pretty much not. Start a bit more before. Yeah, it would be. Basically, here he starts talking about how creationists.
Shall I play it?
Go for it. Yeah, you can play it.
Yeah. Yeah. Go.
But the worst of all of them was this: In 2001, Louisiana legislator Sharon Weston Broom submitted a bill saying that
Mhm.
creationists believe that all men are created equal with inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She said that the
True.
writings of Charles Darwin promoted the justification of racism because, she said, the core concepts of a Darwinist ideology is that certain races and classes of humans are inherently superior to others. And
Hmm.
she said that Hitler was a Darwinist who exploited these racist views.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one to say that, of course. I mean, I've heard this repeated hundreds of times over the course of my life, but it is a disgusting misrepresentation of all involved. For one thing, none of these people agreed with Darwin about anything.
Fair enough.
This is the very thing that Darwin argued against. This is
Nah,
what happens
that's
with
not true.
religious extremism.
That's
So
not, when he
yeah,
said Darwin argued against it, it's like that's not true. But it's true though. These are most likely not evolutionists. They were racist. So fair enough. Again, I'm not here defending these stuff. It's totally right. You know what I mean?
all right.
Extremists are in
Let's
charge of
continue.
everything. So much for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Hmm.
So much for Christians believing that all men were created equal.
Hmm.
I challenged creationists many times to show me where Hitler ever promoted or accepted evolution. They pointed me to Volume 2, Chapter 4 of Mein Kampf.
Hmm.
There, Hitler mentions evolution and talks about what brought mankind away from the animal world. That does seem like he's promoting Darwin's idea, but in that passage, Hitler specifies that he's only talking about cultural evolution. And he says that man's inventions were the ticket, not any
Hmm.
biological
Okay,
process.
pause it there.
And yet,
So, I mean, cultural evolution is part of evolution. It's not really any different. You have to develop even culture for evolution to happen. So it's like it's not really. It's just not. You know what I mean? There's something
Yeah.
about that's not right. But then Hitler clearly said, you know, the first step which visibly brought mankind away from the animal world. And that means you were part of it to begin with. You see the problem? He didn't
Yeah.
say what distinguishes man from animal world. That's how creationists would say it. That's how, when you open a fiqh book, they'll tell you, well, Allah has distinguished man and animal based on, intelligence, mind, that kind of stuff. But he was like, no, this is cultural evolution. So apparently this is not evolution. Well, continue the video.
that same paragraph, Hitler talks about what everyone who believes in the higher evolution of living organisms must admit. Again, sounds like he's promoting evolution, but creationists don't
Mhm.
recognize their own arguments in Hitler's words because
Yeah,
Hitler
pause
just
there.
criticized.
You can see how he read it, stopped to admit, and that's it. He just stopped. He literally started giving his own interpretation. It's like, mate, just read, continue reading. And it talks about how the higher evolution is all about struggle for life. And it's like, well, what do you think struggle for life meant? It doesn't mean creationism, it's evolution. He literally highlighted it, as you can see, and he stopped at admit. I said, well, why did you stop there? You just read on. That's all you have to do. You know what I mean? But anyway,
I
continue.
mean that's what he claims creationists do anyway.
Well, true, yeah.
A
But
belief
these
that
are not
he
important.
doesn't share, which is why he questions how it all began.
Yeah, pause that now. When he said how the whole thing began, that is interesting. I don't know what he means by that. When I heard it, I thought he was referring to the a talk that Hitler gave, with his henchmen like Himmler and stuff, where Hitler doubted evolution in 1942. He did do that, but I don't know if Aron Rao meant that. If Aron Rao did mean it, then unfortunately it doesn't really help him because all that means is Hitler doubted evolution way after forming the Nazi, or at least be playing a role within the Nazi party. So I don't know what he means, but if he did mean that, well, 1942 started doubting evolution, and so what? He was evolutionist before it. Doesn't make a difference. Okay, continue.
Hitler did mention natural evolution, and he
Hmm.
equated that to the strong dominating the weak, something
Yeah,
Darwin never said.
yeah,
But it is
rubbish.
clear from the context that Hitler is not talking about evolution in a Darwinian sense. Hitler
Hmm.
talked about cultural, political, industrial, and military evolution, and the only time he mentioned natural evolution, he obviously meant it in the same sense. For this reason, some translations use the word development instead of evolution.
Not really. They used suppose then they use
Sorry?
development. I said they use the word development because development and evolution is the same thing. You know
Hitler
what I
mentioned
mean?
organic evolution, he was talking about management of an organization. Hitler's
Unreal.
never mentions Darwin's name, and only once does it refer to Darwinian evolution in Volume 1, Chapter 11.
Mhm.
I cited this passage in a number of videos where Hitler uses the same arguments that creationists commonly do. He says he accepts only microevolution, saying that evolution can only occur within definite limits, producing only subtle variants within their kind. He said that new diversity is limited to rare and inviable hybrids between those kinds, and he said that the emergence of new species is impossible.
Okay,
Hitler
that's
used
it.
all these common creationist arguments, saying
That's it.
things. Oh,
Right. No, what did Hitler say? It's, you cannot evolve anything. This sentence that he quoted, right? You have to look at it right from the beginning of the chapter. It's only like a page extra. That's all. The whole thing was about mating. You see what I mean? It was about, as Hitler himself says, field mouse with field mouse, house mouse with a house mouse, wolf with a she wolf. It was all about mating and how nature has restricted mating within, your own kind, for example. And that's what Hitler spoke about. It was very clear, it's very obvious. Let me see. He says here, because I've got the book here as well. He said that even the most superficial observation shows that nature's restricted form of propagation and increase is an almost rigid basic law of all the innumerable forms of expression of her vital urge. Every animal mates only with a member of the same species. The titmouse seeks the titmouse, finch the finch, stork the stork, field mouse the field mouse, the dormouse the dormouse, the wolf the she wolf. Only unusual circumstances can change this, primarily the compulsion of captivity or any other cause that makes it impossible to mate within the same species. Anyway, so he was talking about crossing, he's talking about mating, he's not talking about evolution here. So he was saying that the whole context is that for Darwin, for Hitler, there is superior race, inferior race, right?
Yeah.
The inferior race should not mate with the superior race because the offspring that will, that they'll give birth
Will be
to will be in between. So it's not superior enough than the superior parent, but it's a bit stronger than the weaker one. So Hitler was saying this is not good, this is bad, and this is this is bad. Even in his own, words, is here nature abhors such intercourse. He's talking about mating. He's not talking about species can't change and whatever. No, it's not talking about evolution here at all. It's talking about just mating, reproduction, and how nature has produced this rigid law that superior should only mate with the superior, because if you don't, then problems happen. That's why you have the Aryan race shouldn't mate with the Jew, because the Jew is inferior, Aryan is superior. That's it. That's all he was talking about. And then in fact, let me read this one section. He says here that if this law didn't prevail, this law of mating, then any conceivable higher development of organic living beings would be unthinkable. And it's like, what do you think higher development of organic beings means? It's evolution. Where in the creationist worldview do you see, you have to make people to develop? Develop to what? You're always going to be human. So the whole thing is, again, it's talking about reproduction within an evolutionary framework. He somehow, I don't know how he twisted it to creationism and microevolution. Anyway, that's what he said.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's sort of being the victim of his own criticism here with his sort of thing about cherry picking quotes and taking things out of context.
Even if Hitler said that changes can only be within limits, well, evolutionists also believe that, because change occur over a long period of time. So along the way, things will be limited for now until, of course, evolution happens. So it's like
not only that, you have you can't breed an ant until you get to the size of an elephant, right? There's physiological developmental constraints and whatnot.
And that's what Hitler was talking about. So it's like, well, yeah, Hitler was right. You are limited to a fox with a fox, as he says, and a goose and a goose. And then he was talking about how it is impossible, as Aron Ra says here, it will be impossible to find a fox which has kindly and protective disposition towards a geese. Meaning, again, that every animal is separate. That's how nature has built nature, life.
Mhm.
So, because remember that Hitler sort of made nature God. So, kind of strange view, but anyway.
Yeah.
Darwinists would ever say.
Hmm.
I've never seen any statement Hitler ever made where he even acknowledged Darwinian evolution, except this one passage where he rejects it outright. He even said that
Nah,
such evolution.
that's rubbish, rubbish. Anyway, so he said that he never heard of Hitler ever accepting um, evolution, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, what evidence do you want? Forget his book. Put his book to one side for now. Let's say it's controversial. Just stick with non-controversial evidence. So, for example, I wrote in my article that Hitler's own confidant, meaning someone that Hitler would trust, and he would tell him, his own secrets. His name was Otto Wagner, or Wagner, however you want to say it. He wrote in his book, Hitler, Memoir of a Confidant, published in 1985, obviously after World War II. And he said that according to Hitler, everywhere in life, only a process of selection can prevail. I wonder what selection here means. Among the animals, among plants, everywhere observations have been made. Basically, the stronger, the better survives. Selection, therefore, runs a natural course. As Darwin correctly proved, the choice is not made by some agency, nature chooses. It's like, well, Wagner himself heard Hitler say, as Darwin said. You know what I mean? Can't get more clearer than that. And then in his other book, less controversial, it's called The Second Book. That's literally the name of the book. It's called The Second Book. It wasn't published, so you have Mein Kampf and you have the second book. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hitler had two books. He didn't have Mein Kampf only. He also had a book called Second Book. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that book, it's a long quote, but again, he described.
By the way, maybe you can show the viewers some of your books which refute this idea that the Nazis and Hitler
Oh no,
didn't.
no, he's going to talk about that after this. But let me just share
Okay.
this quote, share a few more references, and that's it. So in the second book that Hitler wrote, he literally described the whole story of evolution. He said the history of the world in the ages when humans did not yet exist was initially a representation of geological occurrences, the clashes of natural forces with each other, the formation of a habitable surface on this planet, the separation of water and land, the formation of mountains, plains, and the seas. That is the history of the world during this time. Later, with the emergence of organic life, human interest focuses on the appearance and disappearance of its thousandfold form. Right? So humans have thousandfold forms. I wonder what that means. Man himself finally becomes visible very late. And from that point on, he begins to understand the term world history as referring primarily to the history of his own development. In other words, the representation of his own evolution. Apparently, evolution here means creationism. This development is characterized by the never ending battle of humans against animals and also against humans themselves. Finally, out of the unclear tangle of individual beings, formation rise, families, tribes, peoples, states, like empires. And then the portrayal of their genesis and dissolution alone is the replication of the eternal struggle for survival. I mean, he's talking about how the earth was formed, and then through not creationist view, this is an explicitly evolutionary view, and then how through all these different thousand forms, finally man came in the end. And then when he looks at these thousand folds, he sees his own evolution. And this is all because of the eternal struggle for survival. That doesn't sound like creationist. That's explicitly
I mean,
evolution.
it's like
No, but he carries on. Sorry?
he's pretty well read for someone from the early 20th century.
Yeah, but it carries on. And then it says here that, surprise, Hitler was a vegetarian. I know it's a bit mass murderer, but a vegetarian. He doesn't like to kill animals. Anyway, so he wanted to prove the superiority of being vegetarian, and his evidence is, as he said to one of his men, that the apes, our relatives in antiquity, are pure herbivores. So therefore, apparently vegetarianism is a good thing. Another one in 1927, in his talk, "What is Nazism?" Hitler said that pacifism is not good because life is all about struggle for existence, and that humans are the product of this struggle, meaning struggle for existence. And then Hitler carries on saying, if your ancestors had not fought, today you would be an animal. I mean, you can't get more clear than this. And then he carries on saying that basically pacifism is not good, and that life is all about, being strong and whatever. And then after that, I mentioned a few historians who have also connected the two about Hitler and Darwin, or at least the Darwinian theory. And I mentioned Ian Kershaw, Joachim Fest, Richard Evans, and Alan Bullock. So you can always read their literature and see that it's explicitly evolutionary. But yeah, we continue.
Let's do this.
Is a sin against the eternal creator. Creationists, of course, don't want to admit that Hitler was one of their own, but they have no evidence to excuse it. By their own admission, the same criteria they would use against him would also excuse the majority of mainstream Christians today. We have no way to know what someone's beliefs are other than what they say. Hitler
exactly. Exactly. I just showed you what he said. So he explicitly
God as a Christian, and more specifically, a Catholic. But in
I
this
pause there. Now, I don't want to argue if Hitler was a Catholic or not, but he wasn't. Simple as that. He believed the Old Testament was full of contradictions. In school, like any typical atheist, he said, in my school, I had to distinguish between science and religion, so I chose science. And it's like, yeah, these are just typical atheistic. He's not an atheist, but you know what I mean? Atheists usually bring these ideas. And he said that, what was it now? He said, yeah, that the church was wrong before, the 6-day creation and the geocentric view of the universe or whatever. And the best one, the one that atheists really love, and that is, there's so many religions. How do you know yours is true? But Hitler, the way he said it was, there's 170 religions. How do you know yours is true? So it's like, I don't know where he got the figure 170, but irrespective, the point is, that doesn't sound like a Christian. He persecuted Christians. Let's be honest. He killed Catholics, Protestants. He didn't care. He mentioned Martin Luther, but he's a Protestant, but it doesn't prove much. He mentioned Martin Luther because obviously he was anti-Jewish. Hitler's anti-Jewish, so that's pretty much their relationship. I wouldn't say he was religious. He wasn't a Catholic. He wasn't a Protestant. He wasn't a Christian at all. But Richard Weicker, he actually argues he was a pantheist, and that's an interesting view where he worships nature. Or something
could you mention his book and a little bit about it, because that also debunks Aaron Ra's sort of claims.
Yeah. No, it's called Hitler's Religion by Richard Weicker. He published in 2016. I've got it here.
No, there's another one, From Darwin to Hitler.
Yeah, but I didn't read that one. But that was more like the connection between Darwin's ideas down through the different scientists and whatever towards Hitler. But this book, Hitler's Religion, is more about what did actually Hitler think? Was he religious? Was he not religious? And he argues in this book that no, he wasn't. But another book by Richard Weicker would be Hitler's Ethic. Hitler's Ethic is amazing. It's very good. But yeah, you can continue now.
Okay.
It claimed that he was also a creationist. Elsewhere, Hitler even explained that his hatred of Jews was motivated by religious beliefs, not by science. As further proof that Hitler rejected Darwinism, he banned all of Darwin's books and ordered they be burnt. Joseph Stalin, the same thing.
Okay, so this is the point where, and I think for everybody watching, this is the easiest thing to debunk. Yet Aaron Ra kept it in his video, right? You heard him say it, and I'm just going to repeat it because it's such an important point. Look what he says, right?
He banned all of Darwin's books and ordered they be burnt.
He banned all of Darwin's books and ordered that they be burnt. Could you show us some of your collection?
No, I'll show it. But let me just explain, because I explained that in my article. But where did he get that information from? I mentioned in my article that it is true that newspapers, even then at that time, back in 1933, they did mention that. They did say, for example, I wrote here that according to the Manchester Guardian in 1933, I think it was May, they wrote, literally in capital letters, Nazis ban Darwin and Freud. And it's like, all right, fair enough. But they don't seem to understand, what really happened. You know what I mean? And the evolutionists have latched onto the story. So it's very important to understand he got his information from Talk Origin. In fact, his whole research is literally from Talk Origin. It's an evangelical evolutionary site. It's not trustworthy. It literally defends Darwin instead of truth. And that's the problem with the website. But that website says the same thing, and which is obviously what Aron Ra has relied on. And he said that Hitler banned Darwin's books, and it's like, well, nowhere did Hitler even mention Darwin in any of these bans. So basically, what happened is the context of this story, because of course Aron Ra doesn't know the history of Nazis. He never read it, at least I assume so. It doesn't seem to be knowledgeable. Maybe 6 years later today he may know some, but basically, the context of this whole story was when Hitler came to power in 1933. Classic story, right? And 30th of January, Hitler became the Reich Chancellor and then basically got power. And what happened is the first 6 months, which were very important, within these first 6 months, you had the boycott of the Jewish shops, which, caused widespread problems and whatever. And then there was that minor event. Well, not exactly minor, but minor compared to all things he did. And that's about the burning of the books. And the burning of the books wasn't exactly done by Hitler. It was done by student unions with the approval of the Nazis, of course, right? And it was them who decided what to burn and what not to burn. So you cannot really take that as evidence of what Hitler believed or didn't believe. So it's like, so what? By the way, so the Talk Origin website, they rely on another website, and that website explicitly relies on an article which says that Nazis was all about social Darwinism. So it's like the very website you rely on says Nazis was about social Darwinism. So it's like, why do you rely on it? So anyway, that's the context of the story, where in 1935, May, you had 19 different university towns where there was book burnings happening. In fact, according to the newspapers at the time, I don't believe it, but according to the newspapers, they said about 500 tons of books were burned. I don't believe this, but that's what the newspapers at the time said. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot of literature. But anyway, their evidence comes from this journal. It's a Nazi journal. And all the journal says is that the books that should be banned is writings of philosophical and social nature of primitive Darwinism. Now, what the hell is primitive Darwinism? Nobody really knows what it is. And so I wrote in my article that, all right, fair enough, that means anything that's non-primitive Darwinism is allowed. Yeah. You see the problem? So they rely on an article which doesn't even mention Darwin's name. It mentions primitive Darwinism. No one knows what that means. And it was part of this whole thing with student unions, of course, with Nazi approval. And they went around, started burning and literally music and singing songs and whatever. And for them, that was them trying to purge un-German spirit. It was part of trying to Nazify or make things more German. I said it doesn't really mean much towards Hitler, but all right, fair enough. Let's say it's true that Hitler apparently banned it and ordered it to be burnt. Well, where's the document? Prove it. It's as simple as that. Where did Hitler say it? Get the document out. Show me a signature. I'll believe you. It's not true. So what does he say after that? Yeah. Now I will do what you said. So let's see. So if it's true that Hitler apparently banned Darwinism and evolution, then how do you explain? Let's see. How
before you switch off the camera, let me just play it once more. This is going to be sweet.
Yeah.
1 sec.
The proof that Hitler rejected Darwinism, he banned all of Darwin's books and ordered they be
he did it.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Go on, show him. Show him, right, bro. Show him.
So basically, I have in my collection, I have Nazi biology textbooks. Well, let me see. Screen share. Wait, how do I?
Got a good collection there.
Yeah. Wait, let's see. Share. Is that working?
You just need to switch your. Nope, that's not working. What you got to do is just switch your camera on.
Is the camera on? Oh.
No, your camera's off. You switch it on.
Yeah, but let's see. I don't understand. I put share.
No. You don't press share. You just
sorry.
switch the camera. What's it called? You just switch the camera on. Right now it's off. There you go.
Okay. So
But
here
you're
is
frozen.
a book. Oh, is it?
There we
I'm
go.
moving.
There we go.
Is
Carry
it
on.
moving? Oh, you left.
No, I didn't leave. I'm just making your screen bigger.
Think you're back? No, you left again.
No. What I was doing, I was basically leaving.
It's
so
trying
that
different.
your screen is
can
bigger. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, now go ahead. Show the books.
So here is an evolutionary textbook, right? It's obviously about fossils, published during Nazi period, 1941. Let me just double check. I think it was 1941. That's true. Yeah, 1941. At the height of the Nazi power.
Aaron needs to explain why these books exist, because apparently he burnt Darwinism, Darwinian books.
You can see here very clearly how man is connected to the.
Yeah, this is for anybody joining us right now. This is Nazi books with clear, it's clear as more than one, and there you go, more German books.
Yeah. I got loads. What, like 8 or something? I mean, this is like the classic, racism. They should be eliminated. I don't know what to say, but basically they should be eliminated. They're the correct Germans, the Aryan race, non-Aryan. But no, there is evolutionary stuff.
Okay, just hang on there.
The fossils.
Go on. Look at that. It's all in German. It's all Nazi propaganda. How is Mr. Ra going to explain this?
Okay, and then you have there's 4 volumes to this book. So there's volume. Where is it? Volume 1. There's 4 volumes to this, but let's try this out. Wait, I can't. I have to look for the evolutionary stuff in this book. Well, there's 4 volumes to this, and they all talk about evolution. None of them hide it. Again, the classic homology, the same, what evolutionists try to use as evidence for their theory. And then you have. I need to look for more stuff. Okay. I need to look for this. Not this one. Okay. I think this is just a comparison between humans and apes. You can see that fossil there.
Okay, so what if somebody watching right now says, "Oh, these are pre-Hitler books or post"?
No, these are published during Hitler's time. That's why I use them. I don't use books published before Hitler's time. This is during Hitler's power, after 1933 to 1945.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Brilliant.
Yeah. What was the no? For example, let's put this. Sorry. For example, this series, for example, the volume 1. If you look very carefully, it was.
Your parents agreeing to Aaron Ra being refuted right now.
Yeah. I can see this.
I can't see it. Yeah, I can see it, but
I can see the name there, and then the text.
No, what does it say?
Okay, basically what it is it was the Minister of Education, right? So it's a Nazi official who actually wrote the introduction to this book, or at least like a preface saying how how amazing this book is. So it's like it's official. So this volume 2, volume 3, and volume 4. These are all official Nazi body textbooks. It was written.
There you go. We have some good Nazi textbooks proving this is, real. This stuff was being taught in Nazi Germany. What are the atheists going to do now? What are they going to do with this, this solid evidence that we have?
Well, this is volume 3. Can't find volume 2, but volume 3. I mean, it's very clear. I don't need to explain what this is. Here is our ancestors. So there you go, our descendants, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Chimpanzee. And
Yeah.
then here's our good old friend, the orangutan. I mean, the colored picture though is very amazing. I'm surprised the Nazis had, such good photos. Really.
Anyone joining us? Because I just noticed when you started putting
Sorry?
up the book, when you started putting up the books, our viewers started increasing. So I guess people like going through old books.
It is amazing. It is amazing. Yeah, you're right. So this is just normal embryonic development. So that's not evolution. But if you just go the next page, yeah, it's evolution again. You know what I mean? In fact, in one of the books, they actually insult the creationists by saying, "Oh, how can you be a creationist when there is, when there is, what do they call it? Organs that don't work, junk
Vestigial,
organs,
that's right. Yeah.
vestigial, exactly." And I was like, "Damn, that's what evolutionists still today say. It hasn't changed." Let's
Yeah.
see.
I reckon if we wake up tomorrow morning after this video, Aaron Ra's going to be watching this and commenting, trying to defend himself.
So this illustration is very interesting because this was Neanderthal, but based on the French version of how Neanderthal would have looked like, is wrong because it looks quite sloppy, kind of sloping forward. That's actually an error, but that was later on corrected. This one, you can still see the student's handwriting. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I don't know what his name is, but that's the student's name right here, and actually he wrote certain things inside the books. I'm thinking, damn, these guys, took the thing serious. But let me look for. Let me see. Actually, I like this. I love how sophisticated they were. It's like thin page, with the human organs.
Pretty good.
It's amazing how they did it. I'm actually surprised they had this kind of stuff back in the days. To be honest, these books are better than most of our biology textbooks today. Swear down. When you look at the illustrations, because there's like loads of photos, and I can't show you everything. But if I were to look, again, Aryan race, always healthy, always white, whatever. Just nuts and stuff. But where is this illustration? All right, I can't find the illustration here, but there's evolution in all of these books. I looked at it properly, and okay, let me just stop the share screen. Is it stop?
No, it's not.
Is it off?
Let me.
Oh.
Yeah, switch off your. There you go. There we go. The parrot's back.
Yeah. So. Oh no! Wait. Let me show you this. I have to show you this. So right. When the books came, let's see. When the books came to my house, they're about like £10, £50 each. Calm down. Yeah. The
bird. Yeah. The bird's trying to finish off Aaron.
The textbooks, they came with original illustration, so I just kept them hidden. But these are proper Nazi stuff where they were doing genetics. You have the recessive, and what's the other one called? Yeah. The dominant gene. They were doing this stuff, and these are like original stuff. But this is interesting. This one here. It was a newspaper cutting that came with the textbook, with one of the textbooks from Volume 4, the one that I showed you before.
Yeah.
And have a wild guess who this guy is. Oh, you can't really see him properly, but have a guess who this guy is.
Michael?
No. He's another thingy. Eugene Fisher. He was one of the most important evolutionary theorists of the time. And they're celebrating his birthday. and it's in one of these like biology textbooks, and I'm thinking, wow, how did that happen? So, it's interesting. You can buy this stuff. It's not illegal or anything. Just find them in.
Yeah, just a few Nazi books. Shouldn't get you into any trouble, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
All right, let's carry on playing this. I mean, that was. I mean, for me, the rest of his stuff, you can say arguably, he's putting a little bit more maybe effort, but this was just petty. It's just such a silly mistake to make, but he's saying it with so much certainty, Hitler
It's not
got the
just
book.
it's not a silly mistake. It's because evolution
He's
for them is
sorry?
holy. Evolution for them is holy. So
Yeah,
if someone misused it, either they're wrong or they're not evolutionists. You know what I mean? They
yeah,
just
that's
cannot
it.
accept that. You know what? Maybe they were evil evolutionists. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not saying that that's what evolution teaches, but there were evolution at the time who did believe that. That's a fact. Just like today they say evolution is a fact. Well, according to them, killing inferior races was a fact.
yeah.
That's as simple as that. It is
Yeah.
different society, different times.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's his name? Darwin. He wrote the savage races will be wiped out by the civilized races. That's in the Descent of Man.
Oh, he actually says this is not evidence that Darwin meant that the savage race would be eliminated, and it's like, mate, it literally says that. How can you not interpret that way? Incredible. Wait, incredible.
Yeah. Should I play?
Yeah, go ahead.
Darwin did much of the same thing, albeit for different reasons. Both men wanted to believe that man's development could be controlled by ambition as an act of will, but reality isn't like that. Nature only allows you to play the cards you're dealt.
Yeah, that's why that's why the witness to Hitler, he said that Darwin was right and that agency doesn't choose; it's nature that chooses. It's literally what he said. Hitler said. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Where did Hitler say that?
No, that was with his. What was my article? This was Hitler's confidant.
By the way,
So
this is everything that we're speaking about is in the article.
yeah, well, yes, most of the things are in the article. Yeah, that's correct.
Right. Let me play it.
Hitler praised racial purity and superiority, but Darwin
Mhm.
taught that purity led to congenital defects and that superiority was a variable and
You said rubbish. How?
That's
Also-
no way did Darwin ever say that racial purity leads to whatever he just said. It's
I
not
don't give
true.
any evidence for that. Or did he just say?
No,
it?
no, he just said it. It's not true, and that Darwin didn't believe in superiority of races. I mean, he did, and that superiority is variable. No, that's true. That is true. Different races were, of course, superior at different times. That is true, but that still means he believed in a superior race. You know what I mean? He just admitted it. But he doesn't realize he did. So yeah,
Yeah.
because at one point the Greeks were superior according to Darwin, and then look what happened. They're gone. Now it's the British. So he's right, but that still proves he still believed in superior race. So
Yeah.
the superior race should dominate and exterminate the inferior race. So yeah, continue.
determined by the environment. So Sharon Weston Broom was completely wrong about both Darwin and Hitler.
Mhm.
Hitler's prejudice and Darwin's process could not be any more at odds. So I asked these creationists to show me where Darwin ever said anything to imply that he was a racist. It turns out that in all of his works, there is only one passage which could be interpreted that way.
Okay, pause that then.
What he
So he said there's only one place, and it's like rubbish. The whole book is full of racism, full of claims of extermination, loads. I don't know how he just said only this section. This is not true. But let's see how he interprets this, and then we will read it slowly together and just see how amazing the way he interprets this thing. So yeah, do it.
What he said there does sound racist to a 21st century audience. However,
No, it is racist.
remember that in 19th century England, every common man and anthropological authority in the entire global scientific community had for centuries taught that black people were the lowest form of humanity. So Darwin was only
Pause
speaking
it. So at one point, Darwin didn't believe in superior races and inferior race. Next minute, yes, he did, because that's what the people at the time said. Well, which one is it? You know what I mean? So he says that this is how, this is what people said at the time. Well, again, it doesn't really matter, the words he used. Look at actually what he said, right? And look very carefully. He said, at some future. In fact, this comes to it's within a larger context, but you can take it out, and it'll be the same meaning. So he said here that at some future period, meaning in the future, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man, referring to the white races, will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. I mean, that is more than clear. And then he carries on. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes, as this German professor, has remarked, will no doubt be exterminated. So even the apes, they will be exterminated. And then he carries on. The break, meaning the missing links. So the break now between the missing links now between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, right? So right now it's between man and chimpanzee. Well, if all these people get exterminated, the gap will be more wider. And then he carries on. He says, for it will intervene between man in a more civilized state, as we may hope, even than the Caucasian, and some ape as low as the baboon. So he believes that in the future, the gap will be the white man and the baboon. But right now, he says, right now, it's between the Negro or the Australian and the gorilla. You know what I mean? You can't turn around and say, oh, he's just speaking the language of the time. He's literally telling you that the current break between between man and animal is the Negro, as in the African, and the Australian, and then the gorilla. So if you had that famous picture by Ernst Haeckel where he has all these different head, literally.
It's in the article, yeah. And
Yes,
also, I mean, the Victorians were racist, obviously. Some of them, well, actually, a lot of them.
Most of them.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have used evolutionary theory to justify their racism. Here, Darwin's using that. So he's not even a racist according to the standards of his day. He's actually justifying his racism through evolution as opposed to just nothing.
Correct. That's true. Let's continue.
All right.
That was ubiquitous everywhere at that time. It would be an adequate excuse to say that Darwin was a product of his culture in that age. But as it turns out, Darwin doesn't need that excuse.
Oh, really?
He was much more progressive than this one paragraph indicates, because he challenged both the societal and anthropological status quo.
Rubbish.
Remember that.
What does that mean?
He said that he challenged both the ideas of the time. It's not true. Many of his ideas were supported by people at the time. He didn't challenge anything. But basically, what he's trying to say, obviously I've watched the video, what he says is that Darwin produced this monogenistic theory, which was against polygenism, and somehow Darwin won, and nowadays we only believe in monogenism. So monogenism is the idea that all humans come from one common ancestor. Polygenism is the idea that different races came from different ancestors, right? So the blacks have their ancestor, the whites got their ancestors, the Asians got their ancestors, so on and so forth, right? That's polygenism. Monogenism, one ancestor. All of us go back to, one or a very limited number of ancestors, right? That's monogenism. So it's like, well, at that time, people believed on both views. Where was Darwin unique in that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before Darwin proposed the idea of common ancestry, all the other scientists had for centuries believed that the races of men count as different species.
See?
This idea is still common even among...
It's not true. There were some who also believed that all men were one species and they were just different races, like Darwin. You know what I mean? Darwin believed that all man, irrespective of who he is, it does belong to one species. That's correct. But then he classified them through subspecies, or what we now call race. So he's still differentiated between the races. But yeah, it's true. There were those who believed in polygenism, and they did unfortunately, split mankind into different species, and all these species come from separate ancestors. But again, even at that time, they did say that Darwinism can fit both monogenism and polygenism. It really wouldn't make a difference. There's nothing within Darwin's theory that somehow you have to believe in a single ancestor. It's not necessary. Darwin believed that, yeah, but it's not necessary. People at the time already noted that. So there's nothing unique. I don't know what he means. Anyway.
Yeah.
Among Darwin's contemporaries, like anthropologist Louis Agassiz. Agassiz was a staunch creationist who said that there were 8 different races of men.
True.
And I know of a Bible college in Australia when I lived there many years ago. Brought up in the city of Brisbane, there was a Bible college that taught that you don't take the gospel to the Australian Aborigines because they're not the same race as other people.
Remember that everyone in Darwin's world thought like this, from the clergy and throughout
No, not
academia.
everyone. Some.
Virtually everyone.
Yeah, not everyone, just some. But again, that's not really important. It's
Yeah.
irrelevant.
Ian believed that blacks were lower than whites and that different races were different species. So, of course, we can accept that Darwin believed the same thing.
He didn't know.
If you read his last book, Descent of Man, you'll see an evolution in his thinking.
Pause there.
In the first of the book, he said,
Well, he said if you read his last book was on worms. It wasn't Descent of Man. So literally his last book was on worms and how worms live their life.
Well, what a way to finish yourself. The last book. It's like the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, he basically opened up a can of worms before he hit the can. Before. Oh man.
things what you expect. But as the work progresses, he begins to question the idea.
I can't hear properly.
You should be able to. I don't know. Do you know the volume on this is very low? This video.
No, it was good before. It's just that, in that.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Even this video, I think the volume goes up and down. Maybe.
Okay.
Okay. Race was
Better.
and not of any actual value
Yeah.
regarding people. He said human beings were not sufficiently distinct to be considered separate species.
True.
Racist people then and now defend their notions of purity by saying,
I'll tell you this, oil and water don't mix.
so there should be some clear division. But Darwin said that our biased judgments against other people were superficial and erroneous, and that no matter how
No, let them continue. This is.
distinct others may appear to
Let's just do
European eyes, there was no consistent distinction because some Africans still shared traits with some Caucasians, and the same was true of every other group too. So that every race blends into every other race at some point, such that it is impossible to determine any real division.
Okay, pause it. Oh no, go back. Sorry, I want that sentence. Sorry. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So okay, so I literally don't understand how he read that sentence and came up with the idea that all humans are similar. Right? I literally don't understand how he did it. First of all, well, just read it. Right? He said here that even the most distinct races of man are much like each other in form than would at first be seen. Okay, so he's saying that most people are like each other. And then look what he says. Look what he excludes out. Certain Negroes must be accepted. It's like he just said it.
Pure
He just
racism,
said,
yeah.
we are all dissimilar, except black people or some black people, as he said. So except some black people, forget that. But the rest are very similar. And it's like, mate, how did you read? Basically, what he did is, can you see how he highlighted it? He put certain Negro tribes have Caucasian features. That's how he read it. If you just read the whole sentence, you can literally see Darwin said all men are similar, minus some black people. You know what I mean? And how on earth he read that passage and came up with his crazy understanding. I don't know. To me, that was shocking. When I read this, I was like, oh, wow, look, Darwin is a racist. When he read it, it was like, oh, he's not a racist. Madness. But yeah. Let's continue.
Any real division. To illustrate this, he noticed how even expert anthropologists may disagree and consequently categorize two individuals of the same ethnicity as though they belong to different races. Most importantly, Darwin tallied the claims of other scientists of his day who couldn't even agree on how many races there were.
True.
He said, man has been studied more carefully than any other animal, and yet there is the greatest possible diversity amongst capable judges, whether he should be classed as a single species or race, or as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 15, 16, 22, 60, or 63. This wasn't the only time that Darwin questioned the judgment of other scientists in his field. He remarked that people of his day were divided into two schools, monogenous and polygenous. Polygenous divided into two groups too. The first group Darwin described as creationists, those who do not accept evolution and must therefore look at different species as separate creations. The other group believed that men had descended from 2 or more species as different as orangutans and gorillas. But Darwin argued that if that were the case, then there would be clear indications of that in the comparative skeletons of men. Thus, Darwin predicted that naturalists who admit the principle of evolution will feel no doubt that all the races of man are descended from a single primitive stock. He also predicted that once evolution was generally accepted, that the dispute between monogenous and polygenous will die a silent and unobserved death.
Opposing him.
Seems to have come true here.
So basically, he described how Darwin believed in a single species for all men, even those certain Negroes that he excluded, and that we all came from a common ancestor. I mean, it doesn't really mean much, right? Fair enough, that's what he believed. So what? But then look how he said that monogenism and polygenism, that debate, right, has ended, and monogenism has won. And then he said that this is true in our time, right? It's like as if Darwin made a prophecy, but he misunderstood that polygenism didn't end because of evolution or because of Darwin or anything like that. The reason why it ended is because of the concentration camps of the Holocaust. And so people took that serious. They were like, holy crap, we should stop this, stop the polygenism theory and stick with monogenism.
Yeah, Yuval Noah Harari says this in *Sapiens*.
Exactly. So when he said that, I was like, it's not true. The only reason why it was stopped has got nothing to do with Darwin, has got nothing to do with evolution. It has all to do with the violence that took place in World War II, especially during the concentration camps, where people like, you know what, let's just take a chill pill. Let's stick with this whole idea that we're all united, and that's it. That's all. So if, let's say, society goes back to racism, yeah, polygenism will come back. And in fact, just to disprove him again, the theories that were published between Darwin's time or after Darwin's time, all the way to World War II, the amount of polygenism theories is incredible. Loads were published, hell a lot, right? It didn't stop. Because again, like I said, the Darwin's theory is compatible with both monogenism and polygenism. It's just that Darwin took the idea that, I believe in monogenism. That's it. That's just his view. That's how he understood the evidence. But you could take the same evidence and just say they all came from different ancestors. That's it. Yeah. So he's wrong. There's this whole prophecy that Darwin made a prophecy and it's true rubbish. It's the concentration camps. Minus, if you take Hitler out of the picture, maybe it's still today would be polygenists. Who knows? Maybe in schools would be teaching polygenism. But for now, because it's considered racist and all this woke and whatever, it's like for now it's racist. But wait until the future. I mean, Denmark recently has said that the blacks or the non-whites should only make 30% of each city. I mean, it's like, whoa, you're going a bit too racist now. And even the rise of the far right and stuff, where they also believe in different races and whatever, and they use evolution to justify it. Yeah, that's on the rise. Darwin never disproved it. He just took monogenism because he thought that's what the evidence suggests. You can take the same evidence and believe in polygenism.
Yeah.
So let's continue.
So far as I know, the last polygenists were the Christian Identity, a terrorist group with many subsets, including neo-Nazis and Klansmen. According to the FBI, group members and affiliates are responsible for a number of weapons violations, assaults, murders, and bombings. According to the Anti-Defamation League, these affiliates include the Montana Freeman and Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. The Christian Identity believed that Anglos and Aryans were the true Israelites, and that Jews fall into a class of false people with no soul. One expression of their anti-Semitism is the seed line theory, wherein white people descend from Adam and Eve through their goods and hate. And they say that the line of Jewish people began when Eve was impregnated by the serpent in the garden. And since they believe the serpent was the devil in disguise, then the Jews, in their view, were literally the bastard spawn of Satan.
In fact, it's the secular world that is leading the way in regard to dealing with the race issue biologically and not the Christian world. And you know why? Because so many churches have adopted evolutionary ideas in the Bible. So many churches have ignored Genesis and said, we don't want to deal with that. We're not sure if it's true. It doesn't matter. And we concentrate on you.
But the fact is that we never see from Darwin any of the overt bigotry that was so common.
Yeah, just take it, can't stop. Again, nothing to do with it. I don't disagree with him. Yeah, fair enough. They were racist Christians. I don't really care. Just continue.
Including so many of his critics still living today. Quite the opposite. His book, On the Origin of Species, offered no support for either racial purity or superiority, despite the fact that it mentions favored races.
Not true. I mean, it's literally the sense of the origin of species is more than enough. But I mentioned in my article some examples of how Darwin proves superior races and inferior races. So I mentioned some examples, right? And let's see. Let me look at one here. All right. So I mentioned that obviously Darwin did distinguish man. In fact, he distinguished man, different races before even he published The Origin of Species, believe it or not. And you can read my article for the evidence. Let's see. So, for example, this one where Darwin recommended Ernst Haeckel's book because it is actually better than. It's like, well, his book is racist, and Darwin recommended a racist book. It's like, what do you think?
Didn't he write something like if I knew about this book, I wouldn't have published mine? Something like that.
Yeah. I mentioned that in my article. Darwin wrote, if this work, as in Haeckel's work, had appeared before my essay, meaning The Descent of Man, that I should probably never have completed it. So if you were to open Ernst Haeckel, you'll see a lot of similarities actually between Darwin and Haeckel. But if you were to open it, well, it's pretty racist. It's all about racial extermination as well. So I don't know how I read this. But anyway, so I mentioned some few examples here. So, for example, Darwin said that the wife of a degraded Australian savage, a native Australian, who uses hardly any abstract words and cannot count above 4, can hardly exert her self-consciousness or reflect on the nature of her own existence. I mean, that's pretty racist. He's basically saying an Australian woman cannot count to 4. She can't even use any abstract words, and she cannot exert her own self-consciousness, right? And then he compared her to a dog. And let's continue with that, right?
There you go.
Yeah, and then it carries on. He doesn't stop. Then he says that these savages, they enjoy hideous ornaments and equally hideous music. Now, that's not racist. It's not really racist. It's just you think it's hideous. Fair enough. But then he continues. He doesn't stop there. What makes it racist is when
all the words he could have used, hideous.
Yeah, but then he continues and he says it might be urged that their, meaning the savages, aesthetic faculty was not so highly developed as in certain animals, for instance, in birds. Right? So even the birds got better music than the Australians, and then the savages. Then he continues, and this is interesting. He says that animals are not capable of admiring such scenes as the heavens at night, a beautiful landscape, or refined music, right? So animals cannot, admire this. But such high tastes, depending as they do on culture and complex associations, are not enjoyed by barbarians or uneducated persons. And so who do you think the barbarians here? Now, according to the barbarians, according to Darwin, is Americans. It's Americans. It's like, and then you can see how he said high tastes. Even the activities is being classified as high and low. Hideous ornament, high taste. You know what I mean? And then he carries on saying that he who is not content to look at nature like a savage cannot any longer believe that man is a work of separate act of creation. So basically, savages, they don't look at nature. So they're uneducated. And then he carries on. He doesn't end. He carries on. He explains the reasons why savages have this, this low morality, low everything, basically. So he carries on. He says in his book, The Descent of Man, he wrote, the chief causes of the morality of savages, as judged by our standards. Now, it's interesting how he said our standards. Anyway, firstly, the confinement of sympathy to the same tribe. So apparently, savages only care about their own tribe, which is so just not true, because Darwin himself was helped by so-called savages. You see what I mean? Anyway, it carries on. Secondly, insufficient powers of reasoning. So apparently they had the insufficient powers of reasoning. And then thirdly, weak power of self-command. Right? Yeah. And he doesn't finish. He gives an example to prove it, right? And the example he gives, the quote is long, you can read it if you want, but the example he gives is of a drowning man. So he says that a savage would not help the drowning man because he only cares about his tribe, right? As he mentioned above. But, and nor would a woman do it. A civilized woman, she wouldn't do it. The only one who would help a stranger is a civilized man or even a boy, that's according to Darwin's words, who never before risked his life for another, with full courage and sympathy, has disregarded the instinct of self-preservation and plunged at once into a torrent to save a drowning man, though a stranger. So apparently, savages, they don't help foreigners, but civilized races, yeah, they do. So what's funny is that the so-called civilized races were exterminating, butchering the local savages. The way he like totally flipped it. It's the colonists who were going out killing people, and they would only protect themselves. But no, he portrayed as the the savages, the barbarians. They're the ones who do it. And then he carries on. He doesn't finish. He says here that most savages are utterly indifferent to the sufferings of strangers, or even delight in witnessing them. So apparently they enjoy torture. And he carries on. It is well known that women and children of North America, Indians, aided in torturing their enemies. Some savages take a horrid pleasure in cruelty to animals, and humanity with them is an unknown virtue. Apparently they had no humanity. Considering that they're the ones who were doing slavery, I'm surprised he said that, because he was one who was complaining about the slave masters are torturing the savage and stuff, and it's like, oh well, he didn't mention that. In fact, he doesn't mention it at all in his book, believe it or not. And then let's continue, because there's more. Wait, let's continue.
In that book, he wasn't talking about people. Darwin was also often accused of having inspired the near annihilation of Australian Aborigines.
Back in 1924, there was a newspaper published called the New York Tribune, and it had a headline, "The missing links were found in Australia, the Australian Aborigines." Did you know, in fact, that scientists from Germany and England sent people to Australia with instructions on how to kill the Aborigines, how to skin them, how to boil up their skulls as specimens for museums? They paid property owners to herd them over cliffs, herd them in swamps, and so on. This is all a part of Australian history, all in the name of evolution.
But in Descent of Man, Darwin recalls that as a tragic episode which was already underway years before he got there and decades before he published his theory.
Pause.
He had anything to do with that.
So he's saying that Darwin believed that this was tragic. Now he's right that this obviously this was before Darwin even published his book. He's right there. But he said that Darwin felt tragic. Yet read the thing that he highlighted. Where does it say it's tragic? Read it.
After the famous hunt, all of the colonists.
By all the colonists. Where does it say tragic? Nowhere. He literally just added a word that doesn't even exist. He highlighted random words and he was like, oh, he felt tragic. Where? He didn't say the infamous hunt. Maybe he thought of it tragic because he said infamous. But he didn't say that. He said the famous hunt. But then he carries on. And this is interesting because, first of all, when I looked at this, I was like, I never found this sentence. And the reason why I never found the sentence is because he referenced it.
It doesn't exist, yeah.
No, it does exist, but it's in the second edition. He references the first edition because I read that chapter a lot, many times, and I was thinking, I never saw 7,000 and 20,000. Where are these figures from? And I realized the guy gave the wrong reference. It's 1874, not 1871. So we should change the 1 to 4, just to avoid the problem. But
yeah.
So he says he felt tragic, right? He felt tragic, and it's interesting because the whole context to this is to prove why the so-called civilized races are better than the savage races.
Yeah.
And do you know what example he gives?
Go on.
The genocide of the Native Americans. Right? He gives that as an example. So much for tragic, but he gives that as a good example. In fact, he calls it wonderful progress. He doesn't call it tragic. He calls it wonderful progress. And then he carries on.
Sorry, just for the viewers, if you want the references to all of what we've been talking about, then you just need to simply go to this article, which Abdurrahman wrote, and you'll find all of the references he's referring to, such as wonderful progress rather than tragic for this particular issue.
So Darwin carries on with this sentence, and it's interesting because basically what he says is that out of the 7,000 or 20,000, there's apparent difference of opinion, out of all them people, all of them, the Native Australians were massacred, right? And there's only 120 left, 120 individuals, okay? And then he continues saying that These 120 individuals were then taken to Flinders Island. So there's more text, but obviously Aron doesn't show this. And that he says that they were well treated, and despite their being well treated, they still died, which is evidence that they cannot adapt to different islands. And it's like, you literally just mentioned 20,000 or 7,000 people, or Australia, sorry, or
Yeah,
Australians,
he agrees.
yeah, or Australians. He literally just mentioned that they were massacred, and then he says, "Oh, look, they were the 120 remaining Australians. They were taken to different island. Oh, and they still died, even though they were well treated." It's like, what do you mean they were well treated? Their family were butchered under their eyes. They just witnessed it, and he's like, "Oh, that doesn't matter." It's like, you know what I mean? He never said it was tragic anywhere, and in fact, according to Leon Zitzer, which I'll talk about him later on, he actually shows something else. He says that Darwin said that Tasmania, which is obviously the land that Darwin is talking about, enjoyed the great advantage of being free from a native population.
Yep, doesn't sound tragic.
How does that sound tragic? He literally said it's a good advantage that the Australians or the natives of Tasmania were massacred. He never felt tragic. In fact, Zitzer carries on. Let me see. Where is this? Because it's important. Where is it? Yeah, it says here. Zitzer says that Darwin was rather coldly reciting the statistics that point towards the inevitable eradication of the native population. No hint that he feels this is an injustice or mourns their loss.
Yeah.
I'm amazed how he says he felt tragic, and all he highlights is after the famous hunt by all colonists. Nowhere does it say he felt tragic in this sentence. He was proving how the civilized races were great, and he gave the example of wonderful progress of the genocide of the Americans, and he just proves it with the Australians now. So yeah.
Either, nor would he have. He apparently didn't believe in white supremacy either, because he defined savages more by their practice than their lineage. His journals on the HMS Beagle say that Europeans should prefer the dark skin of Tahitians to their own comparative pallor. He said that the finest people he had ever seen were Tahitians, and that the nicest he ever knew was...
The thing with using the Voyage of the Beagle is that's before he became an evolutionist. You see the problem. That's why you shouldn't really use a Voyage of the Beagle. But still, even if you use a Voyage of the Beagle, there's a lot of racist stuff in it. So, but he wasn't evolutionist yet. He was still, becoming an evolutionist. He's sort of. I mean, he became an evolutionist in England. So anyway, it's not really important what I said during the Voyage of the Beagle. Is afterwards when he became an evolutionist. What did he now think?
Black military commanders stationed in South America. Darwin abhorred every aspect of slavery and wrote extensively about that. But he also wrote against the favorites.
Oh, sorry, back. And that sentence is very important. Okay, so Darwin indeed did say, "I shall never again visit a slave country." He did say that. But I argue in my paper that that's just public consumption. It's not true. Because, first of all, it wasn't mentioned in his diary. You remember when Darwin was traveling, he obviously had a diary, right, when he would handwrite his experience. And then from that, he would write his book, correct? And that's how you get the Voyage of the Beagle. So Darwin did say that, and it's not mentioned in the diary, but whether it's mentioned or not, it doesn't even really matter. The reason why it's only for public consumption is because of a letter he sent to his friend who he met during the Voyage of the Beagle, right? And this is what he says. Wait, what was it now? Where is it? I need that letter. Okay. All right, basically, so he sent a letter to his friend, and his name is Sims Covington. I referenced it in my article. And in that letter, Darwin mentions that they found a lot of gold in California. The British apparently found a lot of gold, more likely looted gold from California, which would inevitably cause inflation in the UK, right? Because obviously there's a huge influx of gold now. So Darwin feared that if inflation happens, then Darwin, in his own letter, said, "I will certainly emigrate to Australia." Have a wild guess what Australia is? It's a slave country, right, where the genocide was taking place, as Darwin himself believed. And then he carries on. He doesn't finish there. The letter carries on. The letter was published in 1850. Sorry, the letter was written in 1850, November. He says, I am forced, Darwin says that to his friend, I am forced to live the life of the hermit, but natural history fills up my time. And I am happy in having an excellent wife and children. Any particulars you choose to tell me about yourself always interest me much. What interest can you get for money in a safe investment? How dear is food? I suppose nearly as dear as in England. How much land have you? I was pleased to see the other day that you have a railway commenced, and before they have one in any part of Italy or Turkey. The English certainly are a noble race, and a grand thing is that we have got securely hold of Australia and New Zealand. Once again, accept my thanks for a valuable collection of barnacles, and believe me, dear Covington, your sincere friend, C, as in the letter C, Darwin. I mean, he literally just said it's a grand thing that they took over Australia and New Zealand. 1 minute, oh, it's tragic. Next minute, oh, it's a grand thing. So you could read that letter for yourself if you want. It's published. It was written in 23rd of November, 1850. So it's on the Darwin Correspondence Project. You can find it there. And then I made some notes about the letter. And it's interesting how he says, how much land have you? Like, the land is literally stolen from natives. And the guy's like, oh, how much land have you? Like, as if he's talking to a native. It's like, mate, it's a stolen land. Anyway. And then what else? What else is this? Yeah, and then in the same Voyage of the Beagle, he says, it is impossible for an Englishman to behold these distant colonies without a high pride and satisfaction. To hoist the British flag seems to draw with it as a certain consequence wealth, prosperity, and civilization. So much for feeling tragic about native being killed. But then he carries on. Sorry, not Darwin. Darwin's great-great-grandson. I've got his book, actually. Give me 1 second. Yeah. I've got his book. It's called Darwin, His Daughter, and Human Evolution. In this book, Darwin's great-great-grandson, Randall Keynes, I don't know how to say his name, but Randall Keynes, he said that Darwin said that if the inflation happens, then Darwin will immigrate to the middle states of North America. And have a guess what America was at the time? Sabur?
Yep.
Yeah. So I said that Darwin's great-great-grandson, he's alive today, but he wrote his book, Darwin, His Daughter, and Human Evolution. He says that Darwin said that if the inflation happened, then Darwin will go to the middle states in North America, and have a wild guess what America was at the time.
Yeah.
It was a slave country. So even though I didn't find the letter for that, but that's what his great-great-grandson says. So I don't know if you found the evidence or not. But yeah, he definitely wanted to go to Australia and live there if inflation happens. So this whole idea of I shall never again visit a slave country, he wanted to live in one, let alone visit it.
And he was also, this is also the Voyage of the Beagle, pre-evolutionism.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Before he became an evolutionist.
Oh yeah, that's a good point as well. So, but he did change his mind. There's no doubt about it. The letter to Covington just proves it very, very clearly. And then, I mentioned another letter to Charles Kingsley. Darwin said that the higher races of men, like the Anglo-Saxon race, will spread and exterminate whole nations, and in consequence, how much the human race, viewed as a unit, will have risen in rank. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like he felt tragic about the butchering of, this. I've got some more references, but you can read it. But
yes.
Poured every aspect of slavery and wrote extensively about that.
True.
But he also wrote against the favoritism of Caucasian invaders and opposed the genocide of indigenous tribes.
No.
He often criticized his own race.
He said no?
No, he didn't oppose the genocide of natives. He literally said that the Tasmania enjoyed the great advantage of being free from a native population. You know,
And there's a wonderful progress in Australia.
No, in America.
In America.
That's what I said. Yeah, so it's not true. But yeah, correct.
Race, as contrasted with darker tribes whom he frequently praised. And yet, if you listen to Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis today, somehow it is the creationists who believe that all men are one race and that Darwin.
You pause it there now because it's finished now. It's not a big deal. So again, I don't support Ken Ham or anything. I don't really care what he said. You know, I agree with him that there were creationists who were evil. Absolutely, because who can deny that? So I thought, all right. So I finished my article that way, but then I mentioned certain books that people could read. So I mentioned Leon Zitzer. Leon Zitzer is the best. Then you have Adrian Desmond, famous guy. James Moore, also famous. And then finally, Janet Brown. She's quite famous. Not as much as the other ones. Anyway, so I thought, you know what? Let me cite some of what they said, right? So when I talk about James Moore and Adrian Desmond, in their book, Darwin's Sacred Cause, famous book. And many evolutionists, they cite it like as if it proves Darwin was not a racist. But the authors very explicitly mentioned that, Darwin believed in racial extermination openly. So, for example, they said here that Darwin, who was concerned with ending slavery, ironically began naturalizing the competition of white minds with dark bodies. And they continue. They said here that there's a guy called James Pritchard. He was warning the people of England about the genocide of the Australians, but then the authors say Darwin was already naturalizing the cause and rationalizing the outcome, and that Europeans were the agents of evolution. And then they continue as well.
Is this also in the article?
Yeah. I'm just reading from my article. You can read the book. I've got the references, but you can read the book if you want. So, and then they said here that Darwin was biologizing colonial eradication. Darwin was making racial extinction an inevitable evolutionary consequence. I mean, I can't get more clear than that. So you can read Darwin's Sacred Cause. I do recommend it. I don't agree with some of the things they say, which I explained why. But just to summarize it, they said that Darwin, he did, classify humans as different races, but he didn't do it anatomically. They said that on page 96. I disagree. Darwin did classify humans even anatomically. He believed that, like he said, except a certain Negro race. It's like, well, there you go. He's already doing it. But then the evidence that Darwin uses is, I don't know how he got this evidence, but his evidence was, the toe. The toe, in your feet, on your foot.
Yeah.
He said that the toe is, within the white race is normal, but among some savages,
they can climb trees.
It's similar to the ancestors basically, and it's like, oh wow,
it's like an opposable thumb.
Exactly. He mentioned that, and then he also mentioned how the savages have a better third eyelid, unlike the civilized races. And then he mentioned that the sense of smell, it is more developed within the savage races instead of the civilized races. And obviously, when someone says that the sense of smell is more developed within savage races, not civilized races, obviously he's saying, that they are closer to the animals because the animals have a strong, strong sense of smell.
Yeah.
Then of course you have the best evidence, which is when he said that the Negro or the Australian is close to the gorilla. You can't get more closer than that. That is anatomical. So I disagree with the authors with what they say, but I do recommend the book. Highly go ahead and read it. Amazing book. They don't say that Darwin was not racist. The whole thesis of the book is very simple. Darwin's abolitionism, i.e., anti-slavery, led to Darwin believing in monogenism, the idea that we're all from one common ancestor. That's their thesis. Is it true? No. Is it important? No. So I don't really care if
it's a red herring.
Yes, that's not the point. Okay, if he was anti-slavery and that somehow led to monogenism, well, so what?
Yeah.
Still racist. That's all that matters. So that's their when they say humanitarian, that's all they mean. They're just talking about abolitionism, and it's like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
There were many humanitarians of the time, and they all believed in racial extermination like Darwin. There was no difference.
Yeah.
And then let's see, what does it say? Oh, yeah, no, I give example of a sheep. Darwin gave an example of a sheep. So not only does Darwin classify humans based on anatomy and intellectual, like I mentioned before, but he goes so far as even using a sheep as an example. And he says the black sheep, the black one, right, is what does it say actually? What is it? That the black sheep, he reverted back to his ancestors, and that is injurious character which tend to reappear through reversion. And it's like, wow, even the black sheep is a savage. It's like, bro, it's a sheep. Leave the sheep alone. You know what I mean? So apparently the white sheep is good. The black sheep is, it has reverted back to his ancestors. And obviously, according to Darwin, injurious characters will be eliminated by natural selection. I was like, holy crap, even the sheep is not safe. You know what I mean? So he got, because he trying to say that, he trying to answer this important question. And it is an important question. The question is, why do the so-called civilized races have traits from savage races?
Yeah.
And he answers that through reversion, that during evolution, sometimes the things from the past is still present in the, in the present.
Yeah.
So he said this is an example of reversion or avatism. And so, and interesting enough, Hitler believed that as well. But he used avatism in art. So it's interesting. And then finally, what else did I use here? This is the authors, Adrian Desmond and James Moore. They said in their biography of Darwin in 1992, they said that social Darwinism, right, is often taken to be something extraneous, an ugly concretion added to the pure Darwinian corpus after the event, tarnishing Darwin's image. All right, but then look what they say. But his notebooks make it plain that competition, free trade, imperialism, racial extermination, and sexual inequality were written into the equation from the start. Darwinism was always intended to explain human societies. Like, you know what I mean? You can read the biography. It's an amazing biography. Actually, no, I didn't mention this in my article, but I have to mention it to you. I really have to mention this. So, in the biography of Darwin, it's just called Darwin. Right near the end, on page 653, they mentioned that Darwin was ill. This is now near his end of his life. He's going to die soon. But he went to Lake District with his family. When he went to Lake District, he was reading a book called The Creed of Science by William Graham, right? And William Graham didn't really believe that natural selection was really working, right? And so Dan was like, hey, it is working. And have a wild guess what kind of examples he gave to prove that natural selection is working.
Go on.
All right, he the example.
Extermination or maybe competition and this.
But extermination of what? What is it, extermination of apples or
races? Other races, right?
Mm-hmm. In fact, the authors, this is what they say. They say that what a struggle had gone on between Spaniards and the South American Indians, between the English settlers and the Australian Aborigines, between the colonists and the colonized everywhere. And then now they quote Darwin's words. Remember what risk the nations of Europe ran not so many centuries ago of being overwhelmed by the Turks. Yeah, that's the Turk sentence here. And how ridiculous such an idea now is. The more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beaten the Turkish hollow in the struggle for existence. And then the authors go back and they say, packing for home, because he's gone back to London now, he assured Graham that the elimination of lower races by higher civilized race was inevitable as the Malthusian struggle pushed mankind forward. So even right near the end of his life, the guy's gonna die. When someone said natural selection does not work, the example he gives as evidence was the racial extermination of native populations, or the so-called, savages and barbarians. Even to the end of it, because this is a perfect moment for Darwin to have said, no, my theory is about different colors, moths becoming dark and moths becoming light, and that's it. Exactly. But the examples he gives to prove that natural selection is indeed working is racial extermination, basically genocide, terrorism, atrocities. That's his evidence. So even to the end of his life, he still believed that. So,
he's a hardcore.
Yeah, exactly.
took
And
it to the grave with him.
yeah, let's see what else I've got left. But I didn't mention that in my book. But if you want the reference, like I said, Adrian Desmond James Moore, the biography of Darwin, page 653. And then let's see.
You know what's interesting, Abdurrahman, is what's happening?
I mentioned this. Basically, you know when he spoke about the book burnings by the Nazis.
Oh yeah.
What he doesn't know, what he doesn't know is that there is a plaque, and they got a quote on it, and the quote is by some Jewish guy called Heinrich Heine. And Heinrich Heine wrote before the Nazis came to power, about 100 years before the Nazis came to power. He wrote, whenever they burn books, in the end, they will also burn human beings, right? And so the Germans today, they got that as evidence of how bad the Nazis were. But what Aaron Ra doesn't realize is that you know that quote. You know what I was referring to?
No.
Andalusia. He spoke about the Catholics and the Inquisitions and how they burnt human beings. You know, the fire thing and whatever. So I mentioned that right at the end of my article, and it is contradictory, because Darwin said that Spain was amazing until the Catholics came, not realizing that Spain was under Muslims, and according to him, Muslims, their mental faculties was that of a dog. You know what I mean? That's how he viewed the Muslims. Yeah. So he contradicted himself here, but it doesn't really matter. But so to end this thing, Heinrich Heine wrote a letter to his friend. I must admit that you, great prophet of Mecca, are the greatest poet, and your Quran, though I only know it in Boysen's translation, will not easily escape my memory. So
Allahu Akbar.
It's an interesting thing that the very quote that people have in Berlin right now, where the book burnings took place, they think it's a prophecy, and it's like, no, he's talking about Andalusia, believe it or not. And well, yeah, that's basically it. But you can read my article for the references.
Absolutely. I just want to. We're done with the video, right?
Yeah, we're done. I mean, I could read some more stuff if you want, like about Hitler and stuff, but it's up to you.
Yeah, we'll share the article. I think Aron Ra has been thoroughly refuted in his points, and quite easy to refute as well. So yeah, just go through this great article. It's very well referenced, put together in a very thorough way. And
unfortunately, the caption's not there. I don't know what happened. Oh yeah, that table. Sorry, that table there?
Yeah.
I mentioned how many times Darwin mentioned the word civilized, semi-civilized, savages, lowest savages, and you can see that in the first edition, he mentioned it 55 times, the word civilized. In the second edition, 100 times. In the first edition, he mentioned the word savages 64, but then it goes to 250 in the second edition. It's incredible. And it's, the word lowest, I don't think it's really a different classification, but I just put it just for in case. But yeah, that's Darwin's views.
So there you have it, folks. We had a very good session. Abdurrahman's research in terms of Darwin's racist ideas, which are very hard to try and justify, and Aron's poor response to try and cover those up, actually only really exposed that they're more interested, like Abdurrahman mentioned, in defending Darwin than defending the truth.
You have one atheist spoke about Darwin. It was actually in a debate as well. This atheist, he said that Darwin is our imam. I'm like, wow. No, I swear. So that's how they view Darwin, as this spiritual godfather. And it's like, mate, he's just a human being. Like, chill, He's a 19th century man. There's nothing unique about it, because they always push this idea Darwin was ahead of his time. He wasn't. He was a man of his time. That's it. But don't get me wrong. There are atheists out there that admit. They say, yes, Darwin was a racist. Yes, Darwin believed in all this stuff. But we don't accept this. We just take his theory and make it non-racial. Right? Fair enough. But, Darwin was still a racist, irrespective of how you take evolution today. So there are atheists out there that do admit, and I'm glad that they do. But defending Darwin and somehow claiming that he wasn't a racist, I don't know what more evidence do you need. It's in his books, it's in his letters. You know, but yeah, Darwin is their imam.
So there you have it, folks. We had it's around 11 o'clock now, so UK time. We're gonna end. Jazakallah khair, Abdurrahman. It was a really good
No
session.
worries.
We'll
No
have you
worries.
back again, inshallah, for another topic in the future. But I think, Aaron should respond to this video because I think his points were addressed and beautifully dismantled, I would say, with the references and proofs and clear evidence, including books
Yeah.
which he claimed did not exist. So, Jazakallah khair, everybody. And
No.
until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.